hosting this series. We are recording this meeting. So if you feel more comfortable with your camera off, that's totally fine. It's really lovely to see all your beautiful faces, and it's nice for Meg to be able to see you too as she's talking. So if you do feel comfortable with it, we'd love to see your faces. For those of you I've not met yet, I'm Ann Smith. I'm the head of school at Mildenhall Montessori Schools. And we are 3 schools in Toronto: Tattle Creek Montessori, High Park Gardens, and the Mildenhall School. And as I was saying, this is our very first of our Parent Ed series. Upcoming this fall, tonight we're doing Montessori at home. And upcoming this fall, we are going to have an elementary session. And then we're going to have a Joys and Challenges of ADHD session in November. So that just gets us started for the year. And I want to say a really big thank you to Rebecca for really engineering this whole series for the year and really transforming a vision into a plan. I'm super grateful. So I am not going to keep the spotlight. I'm going to introduce Meg Gunsar. Meg, I think if we're in the, yeah, perfect. Thank you. And Meg is one of our amazing teachers at Tattle Creek Montessori this year. And she is also an incredible Montessori, I would go as far to say expert. I think you've been around, Meg. And she started her early years childhood education, really interested in human development and really interested in kids and family dynamics, which is what she studied as an undergrad, and then went on to do her AMI Montessori training at the primary level. She spent thousands of hours working with kids in a whole variety of settings: traditional conventional schools, childcare centers, Montessori schools, and all different home environments, and really all with the goal of supporting children's needs and their development. So I'm so looking forward to this evening. If you have questions and you don't want to forget it, you could throw it in the chat and we'll get to it at the end. Otherwise, we're going to leave time at the end of the session for questions and answers. I think I've covered it. So I'm going to mute myself now and let Meg take it away.
Great. Thanks for that, Anne. So I'm going to get started. So when we say Montessori at home, what we really mean is the philosophy behind what we do in Montessori applied in a home environment. So here's a question we can all take a moment to ask ourselves. What are some of the guiding ideas and principles of what we do in Montessori? I'm going to give you all, I don't know, about a minute to maybe think about it. There's things that come up often are ones like independence, compassion, self-sufficiency, problem solving, conflict resolution, self-discipline, right? Basically supporting the child's whole development. That's our goal. Well, I have some good news. It's actually very possible to create a home environment that can meet these needs without all the materials of the classroom. So you don't have to go out and purchase a classroom to put in your home. The work of the home is more about children belonging to their world and participating in their community, and less about learning so-called academics through lessons. That's for school. So we want children to be able to intentionally and actively participate in their days, rather than just have their days be something that happens to them as they get dragged along. So let's talk about what makes an environment. Well, an environment consists of 2 parts. So there's the tangible. These are things you can touch and feel and see. And the intangible. This is more about how it feels. The 2 go together, as how a space looks often affects how it feels. We're going to talk about the tangible environment at home first. So the big theme here is going to be accessibility. Imagine a world where nothing was your size. The things you needed or wanted constantly out of your reach, everything way too heavy for you to manipulate, and you needed to ask someone for help or permission anytime you wanted to do something. Would you feel like you belonged to that world? Like you were welcome or that it was made for you? Would you feel like that you had any power or autonomy in that world? Probably not. Not to mention how frustrating it would feel to live in that space. There is a big difference between child-proofing a space and making a space child-friendly. When our focus is on child-proofing, the goal is to keep the child safe by placing everything dangerous out of their reach. Whereas when making spaces child-friendly, the focus is on putting the child-appropriate items within the child's reach. This also helps with safety and limits, as it sends the message that if they can reach it, the item is available to them. But if they can't reach it, then it isn't available to them. It's much harder to differentiate between what is and isn't appropriate if everything is equally inaccessible. So, how can we help our children belong to their world? Well, furniture that is their size, that they don't need an adult to get in or out of. So things like chairs, tables, shelves, beds, stools, a bathroom setup. We could help them by having their things within their reach. So their dishes in the lower cupboards, their clothes in lower shelves and drawers, their coat on a lower hook, their books and their toys on low shelves that they can reach. We can also help them by having everyday tools that they can realistically and successfully manipulate. So small jugs for their drinks, small utensils for serving and eating, dishes that they can actually carry, shovels for in the garden, brooms with short handles. We can also help them by providing them ways to deal with the inevitable consequences. Spills are going to happen. Things are going to break. Things are going to get dropped, right? So a cloth and a broom for spills. A spot to put wet or dirty clothes, accessible garbage where if something drops, they're able to take care of it. Part of this is also an adjustment to our thinking. If everything in our house is precious and cannot take at least some amount of being dropped or spilled on, it's going to be a very tough place to try to learn. Now, let's talk about some of the intangible environment at home as well. The big theme here is expectations. So we've set up this beautiful, accessible environment for our children. It looks lovely, but now what? Now we have to match our expectations to our environment. Here are some examples of how the physical things we set up carry some implied expectations with them. So those clothes we put on the low shelf, your clothes are within your reach because you dress yourself. Your bed is low because you lay down to go to sleep and you get up when you're awake. You have a table and chair set up that you can manipulate and get in and out of because you sit down at meal times. You have serving and eating tools you can manipulate because you serve and feed yourself. Your toys and books are on low shelves because you choose what you'd like to use, get it for yourself, and put it away when you're done. You're able to access the toilet and sink in the bathroom because you use the bathroom when you need to. You have tools and ways to deal with consequences because you don't have to be perfect, but you can also handle the consequences yourself as they come up. And that one's obviously within reason. A big part of expectations is making them clear when you're setting them up. You can do this by going through the motions of the expectation with the child and remaining consistent. I'm sure you've heard it before, but consistency really is key. For example, if the expectation is that your child dress themselves, you would go to their closet with them, choose between a reasonable number of shirts with them, and initially help them get it on their body. You would repeat this for all the clothing I needed for the day. And you would repeat this whole process in the exact same way every single day, helping less and less each time as they get better at dressing themselves. They will eventually take over and not need your help with the process. Some of you may have already been told, "Me do it," by a little one as you tried to help. At all times, we're trying to set up our children for success. So we give them the smaller jug because they're more likely to be able to move that than a jug the size of their torso. We can help them make good choices by allowing them to choose between only appropriate options. For example, in their closet that's within their reach where they're going to go in the morning to pick their outfit, we're only going to keep a few seasonally appropriate choices. So right now that would be a couple t-shirts, some pants, and a few sweaters. There's not going to be shorts in there. There's not going to be sandals. There's not going to be bathing suits. This removes the interaction where they make a choice and then you have to come in and tell them they made the wrong choice and then have to convince them to change their mind and do all of this while rushing to get ready in the morning. An idea in Montessori that I find helpful to remember often is to not help a child with something they can do for themselves. This isn't because we are mean and lazy or trying to do as little as possible. In fact, it is often much more time and effort consuming to allow the space and time children need to do things independently. It is much more about the message it sends each time we jump in to help. So let's say we set up this beautiful environment and we set up the expectation, but as the child gets more comfortable and tries to do things independently, we jump in every time they make a mistake, such as, putting pants on backwards, which happens, or going too slowly, such as, taking 20 minutes to put on a single shoe, or just generally being inefficient. What is that feeling? What is it, the feeling that is going to create? Is it that we trust them to dress themselves, that they're capable of performing this task? Or is it more that they're doing it wrong and are generally not capable? So often when adults try to help, they instead take away from children the very thing that they are trying to instill. So keep in mind how much time your child is going to need to perform a task for themselves and try to plan around that. If one day you're not able to give them that time because you're in a rush or you have to get somewhere extra early, then right from the start you can say, we're going to do it together today. And that way you can kind of speed up that process for that day. That's better than the alternative of letting them get started and then cutting them off in the middle. Now, as far as what kinds of things to include in your home, children are filled with such curiosity when exposed to our natural world, and their brains get fired up in a really positive, functional way. Encouraging real experiences during the first plane of development, which is from birth till about 6 years old, really helps a child develop a fundamental understanding of the world around them. Children really enjoy participating in real-life family experiences and imitating occupations and activities of adults, things like cooking, cleaning, and caring for the environment. So basically, whatever they see their adults do, they want to also do. Children will often use these real-life experiences as the basis for their fantasy play. That's why we see lots of playing home or playing family with the younger ones. Whereas the stimulation that is provided for most video games, TV shows, and the like directed at children is more about the pacing and the rapid-fire changing of the scene. And if a child's brain gets habituated to that pace and to that extreme alertness needed to keep responding and winning, the child ultimately may find the realities of the world underwhelming and understimulating. Under the age of about 6, the child's brain is undergoing massive growth and development, shaped entirely by their environment. Stimulation caused by overexposure to technology such as cell phones, tablets, the TV, basically all the screens during this time has been shown to be associated with executive functioning and attention deficit, cognitive delays, impaired learning, increased impulsivity, and decreased ability to self-regulate, where we see a lot of tantrums as well. It's an important distinction to make that exposing children to fantasy does not lead to creativity on their part, rather directs their imagination according to the adult's ideas. So it isn't that children under 6 can never tell between reality and fantasy, rather that they aren't always sure which category something falls under when first exposed to it. It becomes ever harder when the adults in their lives go along with the fantasy, as they're likely to just take the adult's word for it until they get a little bit older and are able to look at and question things from a different perspective. A way to help our children is to limit their exposure to the unreal until they have made real connections. For example, once they have been exposed to real animals that do not talk or wear clothes, it will be easier for them to realize that the talking animals in the movie, show, or book are just part of the story and not reality. I also want to talk a bit about the language we use with our children. We use language as a way to convey ideas to others. The specific words we choose to convey those ideas play a big role in how those ideas are interpreted. For example, if we say to a child who's struggling with drop-off, "You have to go to school today," it implies a bunch of things. It implies that school is mandatory, that they have no choice, therefore cannot possibly be choosing to go. And like most things that are forced upon us, school is something that they should try to avoid. However, if we say to that same child, "You get to go to school today," it implies that there was a choice and going was the better one, and that school is a privilege they're lucky to enjoy. And between those two, there's really just one word difference, and a bit of tone as well. If we remember that children don't have an existing idea of what school means, doesn't it make more sense to set it up for them as something fresh and positive, rather than unloading the baggage most adults who have gone to school for 12 plus years feel about it onto them? So this same thing applies to all new experiences. The words we use to tell them about the experience shape how they're going to feel about it. Children of this age also need our help to pinpoint the words they're attaching to their feelings and situations. Continuing with that same example, it often isn't this coming to school part that the children will be trying to avoid, rather the separation from the parent. It has very little to do with the actual location. We know that because once they come in and that moment of separation has passed, they're happy. In that instance, we can help them define that feeling they're experiencing as missing mom or dad or finding it hard to leave them in that moment, rather than labeling it as how they feel about coming to school. Again, to be mindful of the perspective we are creating for them about their world with our word choices. Often, acknowledging the feeling they're having goes a long way towards making the moment seem less dramatic. Another example of this would be in response to a child feeling upset and throwing things, to say, "I can see that you are upset, but it isn't okay to throw. You can use your words to tell me what you are feeling, and I can try to help you." And you can put in any of the feeling words there that make sense in that moment. You could use frustrated, you could use angry, whatever applies. By doing so, we have acknowledged their feelings, reminded them of the boundaries, and offered them an appropriate alternative. Remember that as children of this age are building their language, their building materials are whatever is in their environment. Whatever you hear coming out of their mouth, know that that is what they are hearing. So, if you are hearing things you don't like coming out of them, try to locate where the source is, because they're definitely getting it from somewhere. I know it happens to me all the time where I hear my exact words or phrasing coming out of children's mouths in the class. It always catches me a little bit, but it's a good reminder to really reflect on the words we're choosing to use with children. Speaking of words, let's talk about how we can give words power. Simply put, consistency. It comes up again. Basically, say what you mean and mean what you say. Children at this age are creating their vocabularies from scratch and have to do a bit of testing to make sure they know what each word means. This often looks like boundary pushing, which is just children looking for consistency, stability, and predictability in order to feel secure. No is a word that comes up often. Adults want children to listen when they say it, and they don't want children to say it to them. So let's talk about the word no. If it is to have any power, then it has to have the same meaning every time it is used, regardless of the situation. If no sometimes means maybe, if you ask enough times or want it enough, it'll change to yes. Or if we're in the middle of a game like tickling means keep going, then the word itself loses all meaning, and we have to start looking for context and the tone of the word to infer the meaning. This is a really tough skill for children under 6, and they will have to check to see which version of no is being used. It often leads to the adult having to repeat and use an increasingly harsh tone to get the meaning of the no across when they really mean it. A suggestion would be to use alternative words in these different situations that can remain consistent with their meanings, such as saying maybe when that's what you mean, saying I don't know, let's talk about it later when you aren't able to answer the question in that moment, or that's ticklish when playing. It's also very important to remember that words carry the same meaning regardless of who is using them. That means not ignoring the child when they say no. A common trap that adults find themselves in is asking a yes or no question in an instance where there isn't really a choice available. Things like, are you going to sit in your car seat? This can also look like finishing statements with, is that okay? We're going to walk today. Is that okay? Rather, either leave it as a statement or offer them a choice within the acceptable parameters. We are walking home today. Or, are you going to buckle yourself in or would you like some help? Or, which shoe are you going to put on first? In place of, can you put your shoes on? If shoes do indeed have to be put on. Basically, if no isn't an acceptable response, then it should not be an option put forth by the question. And don't worry, I don't live in this magical land where children are always agreeable. There will, of course, be times when they say no anyway, even though you've done all the things. In which case you can say, I can hear you saying no, but it isn't a choice right now, and carry on with what needs to happen. Showing them that you have heard their choice, but maintaining your role as the adult in that relationship. Having given them acceptable choices in other situations often makes it much easier for them to hear when a certain situation isn't a choice. So, as a parent, how are you supposed to know what to expect from your child when they're 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6? Luckily, every child is the exact same, and you were all given the manual when they were born, right? Did you lose yours? No, unfortunately not. But that's where you can bring in the rest of the team around your child. I'm referring to grandparents, to teachers, to caregivers that all care about the well-being of your child. So come chat to your child's teacher about what you can expect from your specific child. And this is where it's extra nice to have Montessorians on your team, as we look at and support all aspects of development, such as motor, language, social, emotional, and cognitive. And also listen to the other people who care for your child to hear what their observations have been about what your child has or hasn't been successful doing. That way, you can adjust as your child develops and keep everyone in the loop and making sure that their needs are being met. So as far as what I have prepared for you today, I'm going to end it there and we're going to open it up for lots of questions. I know we covered a lot of ground there, so we can go into more detail about any of the things that caught your eye.
Sorry, you guys. So the way the Zoom is set up tonight, you have to request, I think, to be unmuted. So if you throw your question or like, sort of raise your hand in the chat, then you can be unmuted for your question so that we don't have just sort of talking over, which interrupts the Zoom.
Okay, so I see one there. I struggle with getting my child to stay on task. Yep. So I would ask a bit more specifics around that. But in general, I would say if a child is really struggling to stay on a task, I would want to look at to see how reasonable my expectations about that task are. So am I expecting a 2-year-old to get dressed entirely on their own from beginning to end? Because that would be difficult. But am I expecting a 5-year-old to get dressed beginning to end? That could be a bit more reasonable. So often if a task is too big, then it will be difficult to stay with it. And it might also be a case of having to model the expectation for the task a bit more, with maybe a bit more detail.
Jeremy,
Hi,
yeah, thanks, Rebecca.
guys. Just to say, jumping in, Jeremy, you're unmuted now, I think.
No.
Hi.
Hi.
So you made the point about, giving kids the freedom to put on pants backwards, which it's something that resonates a bit. Like, at what point, like, is the idea to just let that go until the child figures it out by themselves, or is there a point at which you should be giving more guidance and instruction?
Well, there's a few things with that. So there's ways of setting kids up for success with that. So when I'm modeling, for example, if we take the pants as an example, when I place the pants for the child, I place them the right way up, right? So then they can kind of see. And then if I see that consistently they're putting it on backwards, not just sometimes yes, sometimes no, I might, a few months down the line be like, oh, I noticed the tag on the pants. The tag goes at the back. Something like that. But I would also like to point out that we don't see a lot of adults who wear clothes backwards. So I think that they will eventually figure it out. For something like clothes that are backwards, if it's not actually causing any harm, then I would like to leave that for as long as it takes for the child to recognize that that's what's happening. Because often when we do correct children, when they're consistently mix matching it, it's because they didn't notice. So the fact that we corrected it doesn't help them notice it. It just tells them they did it wrong. So we want to avoid it if we can. A sentence I like to use to remind myself often as well for kids is a lot of the time, if they could, they would. So if they're not doing it, then we might have to look at the fact that they aren't able to do it in that moment and see how we can support them get there.
Marina, I can see you have a question. I'm just trying to find you on the screen. Just give me a second here. Or am I frozen? Oh, Marina, where are you? Oh, thank you. There you go. Did that work?
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
You had mentioned like the independent like eating area, like the table and chairs, like their size. I've also heard like advice in prioritizing like meal times together as a family at like the dinner table. So what's the like I guess when would they be using like their child size like eating area as opposed to eating together?
So for eating area, it doesn't necessarily have to be child size. It just has to be so they can get in and out of it. So it's not like a high chair that they're strapped into, but it could be like a booster on a chair that they're actually able to navigate themselves without having to get strapped into. Because it does help to be able to sit together at meal times. It makes a sense because kids are often trying to just belong. So they don't like doing things by themselves as adults are doing something else. Otherwise, the smaller tables, if you have it, could be more for snack times or things like that. So they can choose when they're sitting down to have snack without having an adult nearby. But for meal times, yeah, it's more about not getting strapped in by an adult.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
I'm seeing something in the chat. I hope everyone's fine. I'm just going to read out the question in case people aren't reading the chat. My 3-year-old is fully capable to eat by herself. Unfortunately, we used to feed her every day, and now she is expecting us to feed her every time. She basically doesn't eat unless we feed her, or she says to us, I want you to feed me, when we ask her to eat herself. Could you please give us some tips to reverse that behavior? Sure. Also, very common. So it's so funny to me because parents will often come to me being like, oh, we did this thing and we're the only ones who've ever done it and it's terrible, and it's not. Everyone's done it. So everyone can breathe a sigh of relief. The kids will participate in meal times as much as we kind of give them a chance to. So we could do serve themselves as well. That often helps. And hungry kids will eat as well. So you could just model for her that you are eating, and actually for maybe one meal time, not break. Say, here's your spoon. You're welcome to eat with your spoon. And then you eat with your spoon. And when she is hungry, she will eat. At that point, you might even take her eating with her hands, which, you know, she might do first. But yeah, again, consistency is the one that comes up. So kids, that sounds to me very much like she's just trying to figure out what the expectation is and what it's going to continue to be. So because you're switching the expectation, she's going to have to check it a few times to make sure it's secure, right? So yeah, if you consistently put up the same expectation, eventually she will come around. Yes. Unfortunately, consistency is key.
That I'm just going to jump in for 1 second, because that is a really frequent one because it causes a lot of anxiety,
Yeah.
right? You know, it's really, it can feel really stressful if your child, and can make you feel like a really bad parent if your child isn't eating. Like, we have a lot of associations with food and like all of those things. But just to jump in and say, absolutely, my experience is similar to Meg's, where children, unless they have some like medical reason, they are not going to starve themselves. So
Right.
they will eat, you know, and they also can stand skipping a meal. They'll be okay. And then, you know, so it is really hard to be consistent with that one, because it's really hard to sort of not feed your child.
It might also help for those meals where you're, you know, really setting that expectation to actually serve something they really like, you know, so, you know, they really want to get into it, and also things that are easy to eat. So like, maybe don't start with soup. Soup can be really frustrating, but, you know, start with some bread with a spread on it, because they can handle that, right? That one's easy. So kind of to build up the skills to feeding herself as well will be helpful, so that as soon as she starts it, it's successful.
Okay, so that was a really nice presentation, and I'm kind of embarrassed because I haven't let my child dress himself, and he's 3 years old. And so I guess my question would be, what other things might you just come to mind with 3 years old, since I feel completely embarrassed about this? And
Don't be at all. Don't be at all. Again, your child's teacher is excellent to talk to one-on-one, specifically about what to expect from your child. But generally, by 3, there's some competency around feeding themselves, dressing themselves, and bathroom. I would say those 3 are the big 3. And the rest are just more child specific.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And again, when I say like doing it themselves, it's not perfect by any means, but they're
No, I have the
participating. Yeah.
have the other 2, so I'll get on the clothing.
Yeah. With the clothing, it is very helpful, as I mentioned before, to limit choices and find easy to put on clothes. So like for a while, don't do overalls, you know, like dresses can be really tough.
Yeah,
like
those were
you
really
know.
good points. Yeah.
Yeah. So easy to put on clothes. Again, what we're trying to do is set them up for success. So when they first try something, they feel good about it. It works. We give them a chance to actually succeed, and then we can increase the difficulty.
Sorry, Meg, can you see the one in the chat there?
Yeah, I'm just reading it now.
Sorry.
Okay. We have multiple kids. Can you provide language or suggestions for telling younger children that certain prepared spaces or items are not yet available to them? For example, if you have a water jug set out for an older child. So that can be quite tricky because the younger kids always want to do what the older kids are doing, which is also really helpful because it helps get them there and models for them what's coming down the line. For things like water jugs, I would make a point if the older child has one, then the younger child should have one also, but maybe to their size. This is language that we end up actually using in the classroom quite a bit because we do have full 3-year ranges in the Casa classroom where, you know, the 2.5, 3-year-old that first comes in isn't necessarily going to be using materials that the 6-year-olds are going to use, but they are there and they can see them and they can see the 6-year-olds using them. So we can just say, we're going to save that for another day, or, you know, so-and-so is using that right now. That's for them. This is what you can use. So always bringing into giving them the appropriate option instead, not leaving it as not that one, like being like, not that one right now, this one today. So kind of guiding them towards what is an acceptable, appropriate choice for them. Does that make sense? Great, thanks.
Anybody else? Oh, there we go. There you are, Christina.
Hello, thank you so much. It's really very, very helpful and interesting. I want to ask a question about what is the Montessori approach about kids falling asleep on their own or with the parent? And the reason why I'm asking is I actually do not really know how exactly Montessori, what Montessori approach for that. And for instance, now for my absolutely capable to eat herself daughter who is eating right now with a spoon a juice, but she doesn't want to eat food with a spoon. So for her, she used to fall asleep in the past by herself, but last year, basically we stay in the room with her and sometimes it takes like half an hour and she totally cries and loses it if we try to leave the room until she falls asleep. So I'm basically trying to, and it's fine, we absolutely fine to keep doing it, but when you're talking about independency, this is what I'm trying to understand, is it actually linked? Does independency mean that they're supposed to stay and fall asleep on their own, or it's okay with the parent being around? If you can please talk a little bit about that, would be really great. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a bit to say about that. Sleep is one that comes up often, and there's a huge variety of advice that comes with sleep. So my first thing is always go with the one that is working for you. So there's no reason to go do something because a book said so if it's making everyone's life miserable. So if it's working for you, I wouldn't worry too much about it. It would be nice to kind of build in some self-soothing components to that half hour you're spending together for where your child is falling asleep, so that they can kind of start taking over doing those as well. So things like nice deep breathing or snuggling a teddy, something like that, where these are things that they could do even if you weren't there that would still continue to feel soothing to help get to sleep. And you can move towards independence in that way. Whereas if it requires you holding them up and rocking them, they're not really going to be able to do that on their own. So that's going to be tougher to transition out of. Does that make sense? Okay. But like I said, if it is working for you and it's functioning, then I wouldn't be too concerned about what does the book say to do. Nice.
I think we might be getting to the end here. This might be your last chance. Anybody else? Okay, then we're gonna wrap it up. Meg, thank you so much.
You're welcome. These were great questions. I liked the variety that we had.
Yeah, I'm so grateful, not for how we found out about Zoom, but I'm so grateful for this opportunity so people can show up, you know,
Right.
with their babies or in their pajamas or however we are tonight. And, you know, we didn't have to go back outside and into school or anything like that. And
Right.
thank you for your time, Meg, and your expertise. I'm so grateful for it. And we will make that a night, everybody. It's so
Perfect.
nice to see everyone. I love these things. So if you want to turn on your camera, just to wave and say good night. We would love to see you and your pajamas and your children and all of it. So thank you so much, Meg.
You're so welcome.